Hi everyone, I'm Krzysztof Wilaszek. You can call me Chris for short. I know that the first name doesn't roll off the tongue too easily. I'm with Codility, and Codility is a platform that helps recruit best software developers. We help companies like Barclays, like Amex, Zalando, Ocado, and the others quickly identify the best talent that they've got in the recruitment pipeline, and later on invite the ones who they really want to speak with to the interviews, removing any bias within the process, really testing them on skills, and providing great candidate experience in the process.
Hello, my name's Emma Clark. I'm one of the talent acquisition partners at Siemens. I'm responsible for recruiting a wide variety of different roles within our engineering business, a lot of those being IT and tech positions. And things that I'm really heavily involved in at the moment is the neurodiversity, and also I'm leading on our returners program for this year. Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome to the panel. No one's got any questions yet. Really? You all must have written down a question at the beginning of the day. Okay, so I'm going to kick it off. So there's a lot of, and we've had quite a lot of talk this morning around tech shortage, tech talent shortage. How do you guys look at skills versus culture fit? Who wants to start?
I can kick it off a bit.
Yeah.
It's always a very interesting topic, right? You will have the tech teams really looking to find their colleagues who can actually do the work that they do or even better than them. So tech stack is definitely important. The experience to actually deliver things in a certain methodology is also important. But from what I experienced so far, if the culture is not inclusive and if the recruitment process does not have culture as one of the key wrapping points of the entire process, it's pointless. No matter how skilled your workforce is, if they don't feel that they are part of a bigger project than, okay, what I educated myself to do or what I gained experience to do, it kind of leads to, of course, attrition and disengagement and even lack of productivity, right? But I think where the extra point for mixing those two together is innovation. From what I experienced, hiring managers or leadership in a business, they want to see progress based on innovation. And that is not possible, again, no matter how skilled you are, if you're not necessarily working nicely with the others and if you don't create things together and build ideas together. I don't think we're at a point where we're doing it perfectly in general in the industry to mix those two. Yeah. It's a massive education process, right? You have a lot of interviewers who start as technical interviewers, then they evolve into managers or leaders, and they need to switch, right? And they need to ask themselves more personal questions around, why am I hiring this person? Why am I not hiring this other person? That's a bit what I've seen as successful, a really fine line of mixing these things, but the effort needs to be consistent and constant, actually.
Yeah. For me, I was really interested in Jane's point about culture add and the fact that if you are continually looking for people who look like and sound like me, you're going to have the same kind of culture in existence forever. If you can't take a culture addition, then there's probably something quite a little bit unhealthy about your culture. So you've got to be robust enough and brave enough to make that step into maybe the kind of people or fits that you haven't thought of before. And I think on the whole, it makes you stronger. We talked about AI earlier, and I think it's quite well perceived now that you can't just have males of a certain age writing AI. Because you exclude or get gender stereotypes that maybe exclude large portions of the society. So unless you're bringing those kind of people on board, unless you're brave enough to venture and bring those people on board, your culture and your company and your products won't change and be fit for purpose. So I think it's great for the skills. Culture fit's important, but be ready to bend that culture and make additions to that culture.
Great. So what we see with other companies is that they would use Codility for pre-screening to identify the best candidates that they have, make sure that they've got the right technical skills. But we always say to the companies, don't hire only based on that. So we encourage customers to bring those candidates on site and then do a round of interviews around culture fit, personality fit, and allow them to spend time together with the teams. And what's great about this, because you only invest a great amount of time with the candidates who you know that they've got the right technical talent. So in the end, it's about the validation that on the personal level, they can be a great addition to the team.
Forgot the question.
Skills versus culture. So if you had two candidates, one scored
Yeah.
higher on skills but less on culture, but someone was slightly higher on culture but
Yeah.
less on skills, who would you pick?
I always say to managers, you can teach skills, you can't change someone's personality. I think it's really important that you do recruit based on values in a business. In Siemens, we have ownership culture, so owning and really absorbing and taking ownership of the wins that you make, but also the fails, because we're all human, we all make mistakes, we're not perfect, we're not robots. And really, when I recruit, it's getting someone who really does embody that ownership element to it. The skills can be taught, whether it's formal coursing, online training, and other methodologies like that. And that's really what I tend to go for is the person, and everything else is an added bonus.
Okay, brilliant. So you all put your questions in at once, so thank you for that. We're going to go for the more sort of generic questions, just so that we don't sort of ostracise one particular panellist. Big question, what are your thoughts on positive discrimination when hiring women in tech?
So maybe I can kick it off. So I think it depends on the company. So I think there are companies that do positively discriminate in order to increase diversity, but this is a conscious process very often. It's linked that more diverse teams, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's education background, whether it's gender, those teams come up with better solutions to the problems, and it directly correlates with better return on investments and profitability for those companies. And some of the companies, they do actually positively discriminate to increase this ratio. And even with, we ran some statistics some time ago in Codility, seeing how many female candidates are being invited to our tests, and we see some companies inviting just in the region of 2% and the others in the region of 60%. And what we see, a lot of that depends on your sourcing efforts as well. So whether you consciously go out to the market, and even though the ratio is just on average 30 to 70, female to male, that some companies consciously try to approach women to increase the ratio within the companies.
Excellent. Well, I know you've worked quite heavily in this field, haven't you?
Sorry?
You've worked quite heavily in this field as well, haven't you?
Yes, and I would like maybe to try to ask people to reframe this theory of positive discrimination, right? I think what we've experienced, nobody wants to be discriminated, positively or negatively. And at the end of the day, I think for me, it has helped me a lot to go on the UN resources. They have beautiful resources that you can tap into, and this is actually reframed to affirmative actions. When your leveling field is not equal, where do you actually make some modifications to give the same chances to people? If we talk about the confidence gap, for example, right? How do we fix that in the industry? And it's not just women, it's all minorities. When we talk about the language that we use. So it's more around calibrating to make sure that everybody has a chance, then the chances need to be given equally. And I think, I don't know if people do consciously efforts in hiring women, but they definitely do conscious efforts in having more women in the pipeline. And again, and I think Linda here was making a beautiful case as well for people with disabilities, we don't look enough at what is needed for groups that are not included in the industry. And we need to do a bit more of that. That would be my take on it.
Thank you.
I think we should expand it further as well, beyond hiring, because the team and I were at a Women in Tech conference a few weeks ago, and somebody came up to our stand, and she's obviously a very, very smart lady that had been on a fast-track program into management, and she basically said she loved being a developer. She was very honoured to be put on the management programme, and she had a few issues with not being able to develop as much as she used to. But her real issue was, above her, to get to board level, there are a lot of older guys that were going to be around for a very long time, and it wasn't a very inspiring situation for her to be in that she's almost been fast-tracked to stay at and basically stay static for even longer in the management process. So I think we need to look through the whole hierarchy, but it's a massive question because obviously those older men who are, I think probably living longer, having to retire later, etc., have got wives and daughters, etc., and families to look after. So you can't just boot them out. But I think we have to come up with a policy of really improving that. And if you look globally, I think the UK is behind on CTOs and CIOs who are female. So I think the dial needs to turn on that. And that will automatically change the amount of women hopefully being brought in, because they will, as the saying goes, you can't be what you can't see. But if you see more people in these positions, these senior positions, you'll hopefully have some more ambition, some aspiration and some focus to really go for.
Excellent. And Emma, we've got a question, a Siemens-specific questions. And returners program, typically speaking, are focused around females. Correct me if I'm wrong, or is that what you're doing differently?
I'm really passionate about making sure that it's as inclusive as possible. So I don't care whether you're female, male, something in between, don't want to say non-binary, I don't care. The only caveat with the returners program is that you've been out of work for more than 2 years. And the reason that you could be out of work could be caring for a relative, it could be personal tragedy, it could be bringing up a family. The returners program was piloted last year, and the real aim of it was to bring women back into engineering, who have been raising a family. But actually through the pilot last year, it was really interesting to see that there was a real 50-50 split, and there was such a wide variety of different reasons why people had been out of work, and actually I think it's really important to be fully inclusive, to be fully kind of open to every single type of individual out there. I'm not a massive advocate of positive discrimination. I would hate to think that I got a job because I was female. I know that it happens, but I think the important thing is that we're getting enough women in at the beginning of the pipeline, and things like the returners program is a great way of doing that, to try and open the talent pool as much as possible.
Excellent, thank you. I don't really get this next question, so apologies if it's just, who do you think would win a battle between a horse-sized duck and 10 duck-sized horses?
Horse-sized duck?
Yeah, horse-sized duck, but it's had 7 up-likes, so I'm not entirely sure if it's an actual thing.
Well, surely the little ones would be squished.
Just get trodden on, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
I'd love to know who actually thought of that question. Are you brave enough to put your hand up? No.
There you go. Excellent. Right, we're going to ask you that question later. Okay, so how do large, complex organisations avoid losing tech talent through the recruitment process, especially compared to the smaller, more nimble corporations who can get those sort of software engineers in quickly?
Communication. I think managing people's expectations and keeping that dialogue open is the most important thing. I have candidates that I speak to who say, I've got offers on the table, but can you get me in for an interview in the next week or so because I really want to join Siemens? And it's having that relationship built with candidates, I think, is really important. Of course, speed is great, but we all know, I mean, I work for a big organisation and managers do vary. And to be honest, recruitment is at the bottom of the table for a lot of managers. They just don't have the time, and that's why we kind of need to be open when we manage expectations and say to candidates, I'm sorry, the role's on hold because of business demand, or, you know, this person's on holiday, and just be open and transparent. I think sometimes we kind of hide behind the telephone or emails, and actually I think honesty is a really integral bit of building that credibility with your candidates. So that's what I would say personally?
I've actually faced this problem recently when I joined actually a year ago, and it was painful. It was painful to see the delay. It was painful to see people lost through the cracks. It was painful to see work gone to waste, right? Key points for us were prioritization, really talking to all our hiring managers and the business itself. What do we want, and what do we want first, and what do we do after that? Because then people can focus on the right things instead of wild goose chase, right? And second was really data-driven recruitment. When we talk about time in stage, time to hire, time in each of them, what are our blockers and who can help us remove those blockers. Scheduling is always a problem, for example, so this is still to be solved if anybody has advice.
Excellent.
Okay, so I think the question was in the answer was in the question as well, the recruitment process, namely. So first of all, really designing the recruitment process, clearly marking who is responsible for which part and what are the timelines and the expectations as well. So this would be the first element. The second element, as you, Emma, mentioned, the relationship between the hiring manager and the talent acquisition partner. So important that talent acquisition teams actually enable those hiring managers to build out the teams and get on with their core duties. It's not something on the top of that. Talent acquisition teams are the enablers, and really making hiring managers aware that it's for them, it's for their own good. Otherwise, they're going to keep on meeting with those candidates, and by the time they're ready to extend the offer, those candidates are going to be gone. Another element, I would say, is the data. So 2 days ago at Unleash in Paris, we invited one of our customers, Luxoft. They went through 64,000 candidates last year. And to make sense of what was happening and to be able to manage that, they built their own ATS based on Jira, and then Tableau sat on the top of that to allow them make sense of the data. And what really changed for them was that, first of all, they could clearly see what was happening within the process, and they could start having those fact-based discussions. So it wasn't about hiring managers coming more and more often, we need more candidates from you, you're not doing a good enough job. But they could go through specific stages of this process and then say, hey, we've sourced this many candidates, this many replied, this many we invited for the on-site. But then they waited for the first meeting with you for 3 weeks. And this is why we lose candidates. And probably if we want to improve this process, this is the bit that we should be working on. So yes, that'd be my advice.
Having that data to have that communication with the hiring managers
exactly.
as well. Yeah, excellent.
Having seen many companies in the process that they have, I think it's it needs to be continually tackled. The process needs to be continually reviewed, continually walked through on what a candidate's journey would look like, and shrinking the time that a decent application comes through to speak to a tech hirer. Now, whether that's you've got reticent tech hirers that need to be brought on side, whether that's you've got other almost pointless paperwork unless that person is correct, move that to the back end of the process, and it's continually reviewing that and making sure you've got the fastest track from application to are they correct for the job, and that can save a lot of time in what is quite a simple thing to do, and being very honest within your team, within your tech hiring managers, to say what is our end goal. It's to get the best talent as fast as possible and making that as short as possible.
Excellent, which probably leads us on quite nicely to the next question. So perhaps some of the tech or tools that you've used to attract or assess or train tech talent. So maybe we won't go into the worst ones, but perhaps if we can look at some of the best ones that people can take back. Are there any that you'd go, do you know what, this is something that we've used? Perhaps Chris, you can start us off on this one.
So in terms of the best technology to attract candidates, I think it's a matter of blend of technologies, to be quite honest. And we see companies who are doing very well when it comes to attracting the talent. First of all, having a strategy in place. And this is so important, knowing what they want to do, how they want to do that, and then support themselves with technologies, rather than just randomly buying accesses and licenses to different tools and solutions and hoping for the best. So that'd be my answer to this.
I'm continually frustrated by ATS's lack of ability to mobilize and work with job boards or many other ways of supplying candidates to optimize how they can work and stop the drop-off. Because when it is optimized, you can see a drop-off of 90% shrink to something like 10 or 15%, and it seems to be such a in some areas, the ATS was built 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. That's how it's going to exist, and there is real resistance to any change, or that cost is put on the customer when there must be more than one customer that ATS is using, that is using a particular supplier. I just find it very frustrating because there's so much value that goes out the window for not just that client, but many other of that ATS's clients. So that's what I'd like to see. The ATSs get really involved in working with APIs and optimizing the applications that they can receive.
So for me, within Siemens, we've just agreed a contract with a company called Visage. Some of you may or may have not heard of them. We at Siemens, we used to spend over £1 million on agency fees, which is a pretty high number. Now that, I believe, Emma, has gone down to about 100,000 now, and that in itself is a pretty great achievement in the last couple of years. And one of the tech tools that we have implemented now has been Visage. So Visage is a tool, and it's not so much for just tech talent, but talent in all the different spaces. And it's a crowdsourcing platform. So you put your job on there. You have around 20 sources that are all across the globe finding candidates for you. And within 24 hours, you have a short list of 20 candidates. And they are not necessarily warm, so some of them are passive, but they get that data from a wide variety of social media platforms. And for me, that's really alleviated the time that I spend sourcing and contacting candidates, especially on the likes of LinkedIn, which, I tend to probably send one email. And with Visage, they will send automatic emails within a 4 to 5 week period. And they'll send 3 emails out. So for me, that's worked really well. I don't just recruit for tech talent. That's just a tiny part of the proportion of people that I do recruit, but that's quite useful. I think not so much kind of a tech tool, but I think actually the talent that I have recruited has actually come through referrals and getting out and speaking and networking. So going to hacker events, and getting out there in the community that you wish to recruit is something that will set you apart from other companies and businesses. But also your referrals, I think that you can't get any better than that. And I've been really surprised by how many developers that I've recruited will know people and know someone within their network. And it's not just kind of filling a role right now, but it's building that pipeline. So I think it's treating that person like the red carpet experience, and they will refer people. It's as simple as that, really. It's treating others how you'd like to be treated. Appreciate that's not tech, but it's kind of worked for me.
Maybe a quick add. Pleasant surprise discovered recently the people who were supposed to be here on stage now, right? Talent.io. Kudos to them. So let's see how they evolve, but we had some interesting success with them for some very niche profiles. But what we really love, and I would recommend for everybody to try it at least once, is I think you guys do also competitions, coding competitions. So Codility, HackerRank, Kaggle for data scientists and machine learning engineers, they are amazing tools to engage early and often talent in the tech space, grow it, and kind of also educate it into what you need as an employer. So let's say your competitors from last year will be better next year. They will come back on your platform when you do a coding competition, and they will already know your brand and what your stack and what you're looking for. And it has brought a lot of success, especially if you're recruiting globally. It's very interesting to kind of see what type of talent exists everywhere in the world simultaneously. I would recommend it.
Excellent. We're going to have one final question, and that's around recruitment agencies. So, Emma, I know you just mentioned that you spent a lot of money, and you've got it down to about 10% of what it used to be. Where do you see the relationship with recruitment agencies, and does it work? How do you go about managing them to make sure that actually you're making the most from your relationship with one another?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one because they've got KPIs to hit. We're a big organisation. We're a nice name to put on their website. Difficulty is I haven't done an agency hire in probably 15 months. And that's a big thing that our talent acquisition team has been doing, is building value and being able to say to our businesses, you're paying us as a service X money, and therefore we're going to bring the candidates to you. I think it's really difficult. I think I have pretty honest conversations with my agencies and just say, I'm sorry, but I haven't got anything to give you. Don't get me wrong, we do use agencies, but in the contractor space, and we have a different system which the talent acquisition team don't get involved in. So if a hiring manager had a need for a temporary resource, we have something called Fieldglass, where they'd put their requirements on. Randstad Sourceright would contact them, and that's how that's managed. So we do use agencies, but it's much more in the contractor space rather than permanent and fixed-term contracts that the talent acquisition team in-house do.
Rana, do you use agencies?
Yeah, so in the past years, working with various big tech organizations, the strategy was to put in-house as much as possible, right? The business partnership is paying off way too much to not invest more in the internal talent acquisition teams. Where I found great advantage was on very niche roles. And up and coming, right? So I've had some great collaborations, actually even working on mainland, but with companies here in London that do cybersecurity recruitment, for example, or very specialized AI focused on, I don't know, specific things that we needed. And because they were able to build for themselves first a network, like they had this capacity, they really invested in building the network specifically for some niches, and they were bringing that extra value in speed and qualified candidates, which we could not do in the same amount of time. That's where at least for the tech departments that I worked with in the past years, that's where the value was for agencies. Yeah. And we would pay them a lot.
Dom, do you have anything to add on?
Yeah,
from a job board side?
I think that obviously, who knows the most about your company? The employees and the people within the recruitment teams of your companies, so they are the best people to make those hires. However, if you are going to dispense with recruitment consultancies, you better have a really good structure to backfill that. If you haven't, it's a real vanity, and if you think you can just put something on LinkedIn or a job board and it will come through. So you have to be realistic that yes, we may take $500,000, $1 million out, but we are going to have to take an investment of real skills, real abilities in-house, and don't make that step unless you're ready to do that, because you will have a real shortfall. And I do think, you know, as Anna was saying, that there is a real value for them when you've exhausted all other possibilities and you've still got a critical role left. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't got those relationships going forward, you've got to start that, and all of that adds to the time to hire and can actually cause you more problems long term. So I think there's definitely a place for them, but make sure they are working hard for you and add value to your process, rather than I've got some agencies, I can't be bothered to change my PSL, I'll just use the same ones. I think you've got to continually monitor their fitness for purpose.
Yeah. Excellent point, thank you. Go on, Chris. Yeah.
Just to add from my side. So it's very often what happens that the moment when you start hiring more, you look for bigger recruitment teams. And it doesn't have to be this way, because there is so much solutions to automate parts of the manual parts of the process, to replace CV screening or phone screening. So it can stay in-house, but you can bring in solution that will allow you and release more human-to-human interactions between the talent acquisition partners and the candidates, which in turn will create way better experience for everybody and will result in a hire.
Yeah, creating the more value-add TA teams, essentially. So, perfect. Thank you very much, guys. See, that whizzed by, didn't it? Lots of fun. So thank you very much. Big round of applause to our panellists. Thank you.
Thank you.